Picture this. A sterile hospital room, harsh fluorescent lights reflecting off cold floors. A young woman named Aurora slowly regains consciousness after a life-saving surgery. Pain pulses through her body, but something else grips her heart even tighter. Two voices locked in a heated argument. As her vision clears, she sees her husband, the millionaire Ethan Blackwood, and a beautiful stranger standing beside him. Their words are laced with betrayal, desperation, and shockingly baby names. Confusion swirls in Aurora's chest. Why is this other woman here? And why does she seem to have a say in naming Aurora's own child? The answer will shatter everything. Aurora James Blackwood was never the type to seek the spotlight. Raised in a modest home in suburban Philadelphia, she had always treasured life's simple pleasures. Quiet mornings on the porch, sipping tea with her parents, volunteering at a local animal shelter, and burying herself in romance novels. Yet fate had other plans. She met Ethan Blackwood, a man whose name alone conjured images of money, power, and glamour. He was a self-made millionaire, the titan behind a string of luxury hotels that reached from New York to Dubai. When they first crossed paths at a charity gala in Manhattan, Aurora was working as an unpaid intern for a local arts foundation. She had been roped into the event to help set up exhibits and greet donors. Never in her wildest dreams did she expect to catch the eye of the star attendee, Ethan Blackwood. But during the silent auction for a painting, Aurora had spoken up, trying to preserve a rare piece of Haitian art that she felt was undervalued. Ethan, intrigued by her passionate stance, had raised his paddle to place a bid that effectively saved the piece from a lukewarm buyer. That night he invited her for a stroll through the gallery, and they discussed art, philanthropy, and their wildly different childhoods. Aurora was mystified. Beneath the confident, polished veneer, Ethan possessed a gentle curiosity about the world, almost childlike. She learned he was once a foster kid who bounced between group homes determined to work his way out of poverty. By the end of the evening, Aurora felt an unspoken connection blooming. Their romance blossomed quickly. Within a few months, Aurora moved into Ethan's penthouse on the Upper East Side. The shift from her humble, one-bedroom apartment to a lavish suite with a private elevator and crystal chandeliers was dizzying, but Aurora adjusted, fueled by love. They married in a private ceremony on a stretch of secluded beach in Bali. No paparazzi, just a few close friends and Aurora's parents looking on, tears of happiness shining in their eyes. Over the next year, Aurora grew accustomed to philanthropic events and black tie galas. She tried her best to keep up with Ethan's circle celebrity chefs, real estate moguls, tech titans. One day, Ethan introduced her to a close acquaintance, Daniel Reynolds, who was the CFO of Blackwood Luxury Ventures, and also mentioned he had dinner the previous week with James Goldfield, a well-known philanthropic investor from Chicago. Everything in Ethan's life seemed to sparkle, but Aurora still felt like an outsider in that glittering world. Yet any lingering doubts faded when Aurora discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy and apprehension in equal measure. She had always wanted children, a cozy family life, the kind she and Ethan had been quietly dreaming of. Ethan seemed ecstatic, opening bank accounts for future college tuition, calling decorators to arrange the nursery, and even scheduling tours of New York's most prestigious preschools, if one could schedule that kind of thing so early. In private moments, though, Aurora sensed a restlessness in him. His busy travel schedule left little time to nurture their connection. But she tried to ignore her fears, hoping motherhood would bring them even closer. Behind the scenes, events were brewing that Aurora could not have foreseen. A casual glance at Ethan's phone might have revealed suspicious text messages, and a sharper ear during a conversation might have detected an unfamiliar female voice in the background of his late-night calls. But Aurora, in her gentle nature, trusted her husband to a fault. She took his late-night phone calls at face value. "Oh, it's just the property manager in Dubai. A client from Hong Kong is having trouble with the bank wires, or Daniel wants me to review a contract." Life was on a trajectory that seemed unstoppable, glamorous, exciting, and full of promise. Until a sudden, drastic turn changed everything, an unexpected medical emergency that landed Aurora in a hospital bed, miles away from the comfort of her luxurious, yet sometimes lonely penthouse. Aurora was 7 months pregnant when she experienced severe abdominal pain and fainted in the hallway of their penthouse. She had been alone at home, organizing baby clothes and daydreaming about the soon-to-arrive little girl they had tentatively named Olivia. Falling to the cold marble floor, she felt a terror unlike anything she had ever known. She crawled toward the kitchen to reach the phone. Before she could dial, darkness overtook her. When she came to, the paramedics were already there, gently lifting her onto a stretcher. She vaguely registered their voices. Her vitals are unstable, possible placental abruption. A swirl of ambulance lights and frightened faces enveloped her. Then Ethan arrived, eyes wild with worry, jumping into the ambulance. He held her hand, tightly whispering promises of safety, telling her to hold on, that everything would be okay. The hospital's corridors blurred around Aurora as they rushed her into surgery. An emergency C-section was indicated to protect both mother and child. She only had scattered impressions, bright overhead lights, the soft beep of hospital machines, the frantic swirl of nurses. Before she slipped into unconsciousness under anesthesia, she caught sight of Ethan, standing near the operating room doors, anguish etched across his face. Her last coherent thought: "Please keep our baby safe." The next hours were critical. Aurora required not only the C-section, but also a complex surgical intervention to stop internal bleeding. The lead surgeon, Dr. Miriam Brooks, was an expert in maternal fetal medicine. Dr. Brooks spent hours in the operating room, working to stabilize Aurora, who had lost a significant amount of blood. Meanwhile, in the waiting area, Ethan paced in silence. Passers-by recognized him, some whispered about the stoic expression on the famous millionaire's face. Others tried to offer help, but Ethan brushed them aside, existing in a solitary bubble of dread and guilt. When the doctor finally emerged, Ethan's entire body tensed. Dr. Brooks explained that Aurora was alive, but in critical condition. The baby girl born prematurely was in the neonatal intensive care unit, NICU. Oxygen tubes helped her tiny lungs breathe, and nurses monitored her every second. Ethan nodded numbly as the doctor spoke. Then he was given a fleeting moment to see his daughter through the glass incubator. His heart swelled with both love and a profound sense of fear. A few hours later, Aurora was wheeled into a recovery room. She was still sedated, her vitals weak but stable. The crisis had passed, but the road to full recovery looked long. Ethan couldn't tear his eyes away from her pale face as he sat vigil at her bedside, ignoring calls and text messages from business associates. For once, the world of high-stakes deals and lavish parties seemed meaningless. At least that was how it appeared on the surface. Hidden beneath Ethan's worry for Aurora and their fragile newborn was an insidious secret that threatened to crack his world apart. One phone call he received in the dimly lit hallway came from Cassandra Harrington, the other woman. Her tone was urgent, not the usual seductive purr. She insisted on coming to the hospital, demanded it even. Ethan tried to dissuade her, warning the repercussions would be huge. But Cassandra was unstoppable. She too held a stake in his unborn child's name, or so she believed. Cassandra Harrington was a well-known socialite, tall, raven-haired, with a beauty that turned heads at every event she graced. She had made fleeting appearances alongside wealthy financiers and A-listers, always seeming to vanish just as quickly as she arrived. Rumor had it that she came from an affluent background herself, but every piece of verified information was contradicted by a different rumor. Some believed she was the heiress to a small shipping empire. Others thought she was simply adept at charming wealthy men to fund her lavish lifestyle. She and Ethan had met 6 months before Aurora's emergency. At a cocktail reception after a summit on sustainable energy in Washington, D.C., Cassandra had cornered Ethan near the bar. He had been alone, scanning messages on his phone. Cassandra wore a flowing emerald gown that evening, accentuating her striking green eyes. Their conversation began innocently enough. She praised Ethan's philanthropic work, particularly a scholarship fund he set up for foster children. She skillfully asked about his business expansions, demonstrating a surprising knowledge of hospitality markets in the Middle East. Over the next few weeks, Cassandra strategically bumped into Ethan at other high-profile gatherings. He soon found himself charmed by her intelligence and edgy wit. One evening, in a moment of vulnerability, Ethan confided in Cassandra about the stress he felt at home, especially his fears around impending fatherhood. Aurora's pregnancy was joyful yet overshadowed by the demands of Ethan's empire. Cassandra was all ears, offering a kind of understanding that bordered on the dangerously empathetic. The friendship escalated quickly. The first time they were intimate, Ethan felt a suffocating guilt. He reasoned with himself that it was only a moment, relapse, he would not let it happen again. But it did. Each time Cassandra grew bolder, weaving herself deeper into Ethan's life, slipping into every crack and crevice his unstable emotions provided. By the time Aurora was 6 months pregnant, Ethan was living a dual existence, the dutiful husband, preparing for fatherhood at home, and the clandestine lover meeting Cassandra in exclusive hotel suites. Cassandra had grand ideas of her own. She fantasized about dethroning Aurora, stepping into her shoes as the rightful partner to the wealthy and influential Ethan Blackwood. She had even suggested that if Aurora's child happened to be a boy, Ethan's potential heir, maybe the newborn's name should reflect a legacy that Cassandra could also share in. Ethan brushed off her suggestions, insisting that baby names were a sacred domain between him and Aurora. Yet Cassandra's persistence never wavered. So when Aurora's emergency surgery occurred, Cassandra saw it as the perfect moment to seize an opportunity. She believed that a crisis could bring secrets into the light, and she intended to shape the narrative in her favor. She marched into the hospital the morning after Aurora's surgery, wearing a tailored designer suit. Her face masked with what she imagined was an expression of deep concern. Hospital staff recognized Cassandra from society columns, though they were puzzled about her presence. After all, Aurora's visitors were restricted to close family. Cassandra breezed past the reception desk, ignoring the nurse's protestations and breezing into the recovery ward as if she owned it. Ethan was on the phone with a lawyer when Cassandra found him. He quickly ended the call and hissed at her to leave, but Cassandra refused, claiming she had a right to be there. On top of that, she argued that Ethan needed emotional support. Sparks of anger lit Ethan's eyes as he scanned the corridor to make sure no staff were overhearing their conversation. All the while, Aurora lay in her hospital bed, unconscious, drifting in and out of sedation. For now, she remained blissfully unaware of the storm gathering, just outside her door. 2 days post-surgery. Aurora began to stir. Her eyelids fluttered, muscles stiff her entire body, throbbing with dull pain. Confusion weighed heavily on her. Memories were scattered and incomplete, fainting in the penthouse hallway, the frantic ambulance ride, the bright lights of the operating room. She needed to know where was her baby. A nurse rushed in, pressing a call button to alert the medical team that Aurora was finally conscious. For a few moments, everything was calm. A respiratory therapist checked Aurora's oxygen levels. Dr. Brooks arrived, offering a gentle smile and explaining the complications. Aurora listened, fighting the wave of panic threatening to break. The baby was in the NICU stable for the moment, but still vulnerable due to her premature birth. Relief washed over Aurora at the word stable. She asked for Ethan, not realizing the emotional minefield that awaited her. A nurse gently told her Ethan had stepped outside, but could be summoned immediately. She pressed the call button for him. Within a few minutes, Aurora heard raised voices in the hallway. One was unmistakably Ethan's, clipped and tense. The other was a woman's, ringing like a dangerous melody through the sterile hospital air. Cassandra. Aurora turned her head toward the door as it swung open. Time seemed to slow. Ethan was in the middle of an argument, his brow furrowed, hands clenched. Cassandra stood opposite him, equally agitated, her glossy black hair falling over the lapel of her designer blazer. Aurora blinked in disbelief. Who was this woman? And why did she look so intimately involved in an argument about her child? The words tumbled into the room as if from a nightmare. "You can't name that baby without my input," Cassandra shouted, her voice echoing. "She's my daughter, not yours," Ethan snapped, trying to keep his volume low, but failing. A wave of nausea and confusion washed over Aurora. She tried to push herself upright, ignoring the searing pain in her abdomen. Her voice emerged in a whisper, but it managed to stop their argument cold. "Ethan, what's going on?" she croaked. Both Ethan and Cassandra turned sharply. Cassandra's face was a mixture of triumph and apprehension. Ethan's held a desperate fear. In an instant, nurses rushed in, scolding them for raising their voices in a patient's recovery room. But the damage was already done. Aurora had heard enough to know that the woman standing by her husband's side was far more than a casual visitor. Ethan hurried to Aurora's bedside. He tried to soothe her, to shield her from the tense moment that had just transpired. Cassandra hovered near the doorway, arms folded, an unreadable smirk on her lips. Aurora, Ethan began. "I can explain everything." Aurora's eyes brimmed with tears. She struggled to keep her composure. How could she have missed the signs? She tried to speak, but her throat felt constricted. Her mind spun, weaving random threads of suspicion into a tapestry of betrayal. Without waiting for an invitation, Cassandra stepped forward. "I'm sorry to intrude," she said, her voice oozing false sympathy, "but I had to be here. I care about Ethan and the baby deeply." Aurora's entire body trembled as reality crashed down. She was too weak to engage in a heated confrontation, so she let her tears speak for her. She could see from Cassandra's posture that the woman didn't intend to back down. This was not some fling that ended in a moment of regret. Cassandra was asserting her place as though she believed she had legitimate standing in Aurora's marriage and unbelievably in her child's life. Ethan stood silent, 1,000 unspoken words clogging the space between them. Aurora clenched her fists around the thin hospital sheets. She was terrified, furious, and heartbreakingly vulnerable. For a moment she contemplated throwing a vase or screaming, but her body could barely move and a scream would tear her stitches. So she did the only thing she could. She stared at her husband, silently demanding answers. The medical staff promptly ordered Cassandra out of the room, citing Aurora's need for rest. Cassandra left with a final glare of defiance, and Aurora was too drained to respond. Once they were alone, Ethan approached the bed, hesitantly, taking Aurora's hand in his. He admitted to the affair, stumbling through a list of excuses that sounded hollow, even to his own ears. Aurora listened quietly, tears rolling down her cheeks. The betrayal was more than she could handle at a moment when her body was already at its weakest. She wanted to rage, to hurl accusations at Ethan, but she could barely keep her eyes open. Why would you bring her here?" Aurora finally asked in a trembling voice. Ethan tried to explain that he never intended for Cassandra to show up, that she had done so on her own. His words were disjointed, full of guilt and self-loathing. Aurora's mind drifted to her helpless newborn in the NICU. Her maternal instincts warred with her emotional devastation. She needed to stay strong for her child, yet her husband's betrayal threatened to unravel every ounce of her strength. Over the next few days, Aurora remained in the hospital recovering slowly. Her parents, John and Rosemary James, arrived from Philadelphia in a state of alarm, trying to provide comfort. She confided in her mother about the situation with Cassandra, her voice cracking on every sentence. It was almost too painful to articulate, especially knowing that her father adored Ethan as the son he never had. Ethan spent most of his time shuttling between Aurora's room and the NICU, occasionally handling urgent business matters on his phone in the hospital courtyard. Each time he returned, Aurora avoided his gaze. She couldn't forget the image of Cassandra arguing with him over baby names, as if the mistress actually believed she had a right to shape the destiny of Aurora's child. The press eventually caught wind that Aurora had been hospitalized. Headlines began to swirl through the scandalous details of Ethan's affair, remained, at least for the moment, rumors in the darkest corners of gossip columns. Dr. Brooks advised Aurora to avoid stress to help her body heal. Yet how could she possibly find calm in a situation like this? To complicate matters further, the baby's condition fluctuated. The doctors assured Aurora that her daughter had a good chance of thriving given modern medical advancements. But she was fragile. Her tiny lungs needed respiratory support. Whenever Aurora mustered the strength to be wheeled into the NICU, she'd place a gentle hand against the incubator and murmur soft lullabies. The baby was too weak to cry loudly, and Aurora's heart shattered each time she saw the cluster of tubes and wires sustaining her child's life. During these NICU visits, Ethan would stand near Aurora, both of them gazing at their tiny daughter through the clear plastic. The tension between them was almost unbearable, but a shared sense of responsibility and awe kept them from total collapse. Sometimes Aurora allowed Ethan to push her wheelchair back to her room, her eyes red from tears and exhaustion. But in quieter moments, Aurora found herself replaying Cassandra's words. She had never felt such a burning desire to protect her family. She wanted to take her daughter and vanish from Ethan's life, from all of this heartbreak and public scrutiny. But how could she? She was bound by marriage, by finances, and by the fragile state of her health. Thus, Aurora's illusions of a perfect life lay in shards around her. She had awakened from surgery into a waking nightmare, one that she wished she could escape, but had no choice except to endure. While Aurora recuperated, Cassandra did not vanish into the background as Ethan had hoped. Instead, she seemed emboldened. She reached out to tabloids offering exclusives about her relationship with Ethan. However the editors hesitated, Ethan Blackwood was a powerful name, and they feared legal retaliation. That only pushed Cassandra to more cunning tactics. A few days after Aurora's awakening, Daniel Reynolds, Ethan's close friend and CFO, requested a private meeting with Ethan. They met in the hospital cafeteria, a place Ethan had come to know intimately. Daniel was tense as he relayed a cryptic email he had received from Cassandra's representative, a veiled threat that if Ethan did not acknowledge Cassandra publicly and financially, she would leak information to the press. Ethan sat there in stunned silence, shock slowly morphing into anger. He had been a fool to think Cassandra was simply a fling with no strings attached. She was now actively threatening to tarnish his reputation and possibly overshadow Aurora's hospital recovery. To Ethan, it felt grotesque that Cassandra's manipulations could overshadow the plight of a sick newborn, but the mistress clearly had her own agenda. That afternoon, Ethan confided in Aurora about the extent of Cassandra's threat. Aurora nearly broke down again. Rage flickered beneath her calm exterior. This woman was not only after Ethan, but also intent on bulldozing the fragile hope Aurora clung to. A nurse came to inform them that the NICU had new updates about their daughter's condition. With hearts hammering, both Ethan and Aurora followed the nurse to the incubator area. The doctor explained that the baby was showing signs of improvement, responding well to medication, and might soon be strong enough to attempt bottle feeding. The news was like a lifeline, momentarily lifting the weight of the outside drama from Aurora's shoulders. But that night, Cassandra upped the ante again. She tried to visit the NICU under the pretense of family rights. Security blocked her entry, but her attempt alone was enough to send Aurora spiraling. She felt violated, furious, and terrified that Cassandra would somehow find a legal angle to claim partial guardianship or involvement, no matter how absurd that sounded. Emboldened, Aurora demanded Ethan keep Cassandra away, threatening to publicly file for divorce if he didn't. The words left her lips in a trembling rush, a reflection of her desperation. Ethan hung his head, promising that he would put an immediate end to Cassandra's meddling. However, in the hush of the hospital night, as Aurora tried to sleep amidst the beeping machines and fluorescent lights, she wondered if Ethan had the power or the will to truly extricate Cassandra from their lives. She was growing wary of his reassurances, after all he had let Cassandra into their marriage in the first place. 2 weeks passed. Aurora's recovery progressed, although slowly, and the baby continued to gain strength in the NICU. Aurora could finally walk short distances with the help of a nurse or a walker, and she tried to spend every possible moment by her child's side. Sleep came in fitful bursts, plagued by nightmares of Cassandra holding her baby. Meanwhile, Ethan tried to handle business matters from a makeshift office in a hospital conference room. He also enlisted a team of lawyers and public relations experts to keep Cassandra's threat at bay. Daniel Reynolds, who had always been a supportive friend, grew increasingly concerned about Ethan's mental health. Ethan barely ate, rarely slept, and his phone never stopped ringing. One afternoon, after a particularly stressful phone call, Ethan decided to visit Aurora's room. He found her sitting by the window looking out over a small park adjacent to the hospital. She turned to him with a heavy sadness in her eyes. "I spoke to Dr. Brooks," Aurora said. "She thinks I can be released soon if everything stays stable. But the baby will have to remain here for a while. We'll have to come and go to see her." Ethan nodded, relief flooding him at the notion that Aurora's health was improving. But Aurora's next words were not so comforting. "And when we leave, what then?" Back to our penthouse where Cassandra can show up any time the paparazzi are hounding the hospital entrance. Ethan, they're swarming and they're shouting all kinds of things about you and me and her. Ethan rubbed a hand over his face as though trying to wipe away his guilt. I've instructed security. Cassandra will be banned from the building. I'll handle the paparazzi. You said you'd handle it before, but she keeps coming back. Aurora interjected. The bitterness in her voice was palpable. Then her eyes softened, brimming with tears again. I just want to protect our daughter from all this. She deserves better. Ethan reached for her hand, but Aurora hesitated before allowing the contact. I promise you, Aurora, I will handle Cassandra. She's blackmailing me. Yes, but she has no legal grounds for anything. I'll pay her off if I have to. That confession, I'll pay her off, landed like a lead weight in Aurora's chest. So that's all you can do. Throw money at your mistakes. A trembling silence followed. They both knew their marriage had been altered irrevocably. Aurora was not yet sure if she could forgive him, but the immediate concern was safeguarding their child. The next day, while Aurora napped, Ethan met with his lawyers in a private lounge. He learned that Cassandra's demands had grown. She not only wanted hush money, but also an official acknowledgement from Ethan that she had played a meaningful role in his life. The lawyers considered it an outrageous request akin to emotional extortion. They advised swift action, possibly an injunction to prevent Cassandra from speaking publicly. In the corner of the lounge, Ethan's father-in-law, John James, listened quietly, arms folded over his chest. After the lawyers left, John confronted Ethan. I always believed you had integrity, he said quietly, a note of profound disappointment in his voice. My daughter gave you her heart, and now I find out you've broken every vow you made to her. If you want any chance of redeeming yourself, you need to protect them both, Aurora and that baby. This scandal can't follow that little girl. Do you understand? Me? Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. I promise, he said again, but the word felt flimsier each time he repeated it. Aurora was discharged from the hospital later that week. Walking out under the bright sun should have felt like liberation, but she knew she was leaving behind her still hospitalized infant, returning to a home haunted by betrayal. Sure enough, paparazzi cameras flashed the moment Aurora and Ethan stepped through the hospital doors. Security guards held the photographers at bay, but not before Aurora felt a sting of humiliation. They returned to the penthouse in silence. Aurora quietly surveyed the space, noticing how the baby's bassinet and toys seemed like mockeries of a broken dream. She retreated to the master bedroom, closed the door, and laid down on the bed she once shared with Ethan in happier times. She tried to sleep, but images of Cassandra's triumphant face haunted her. Meanwhile, Ethan made phone calls to arrange full-time security. That evening, an argument erupted when Cassandra sent an envelope to the penthouse, addressed to both Ethan and Aurora. Inside was a letter detailing Cassandra's exclusive story, complete with photos of her and Ethan together at various events, text messages, and private emails. The letter ended with a chilling ultimatum. Pay $1 million or everything goes public. Aurora stared at the letter, her face ashen. This is extortion, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. She wants money. But even then, she won't be done with us, will she? Ethan shook his head. He tried to assure Aurora that his lawyers were on the case, working to file immediate legal action. But Aurora's doubts about Ethan's ability to keep them safe from this circus grew louder with every ticking second. In the weeks that followed, the baby continued to stabilize. Aurora went to the NICU daily, accompanied by security, and found solace in the tiny life that needed her so much. She would gently cradle her daughter in a rocking chair, singing lullabies. The nurses commented on how mother and child thrived in each other's presence, forming that elusive bond that had been threatened by early complications. Yet outside the NICU, the tension with Cassandra escalated. She began attacking Ethan on social media in cryptic posts, thinly veiled references to a cheating mogul who can't keep his promises. Tabloid bloggers started to circle scenting a scandal. Daniel Reynolds scrambled to keep the company's stock price from dipping due to negative press. Ethan found himself drowning in apologies to Aurora, to business associates, even to philanthropic partners who threatened to withdraw from collaborations over the scandal. Despite Aurora's desperation for her life to go back to normal, the seeds of doubt had firmly taken root. She no longer trusted Ethan blindly. A small part of her wondered, could he still be lying about something else? Each time he left the penthouse for business meetings, she experienced a flash of panic, imagining him rendezvousing with Cassandra. Her emotional scars were raw, and healing seemed a distant prospect. One morning, about a month after Aurora's discharge, she arrived at the NICU with her parents. To her surprise, she saw Ethan standing outside, engaged in a tense exchange with someone. Her heart sank when she recognized the tall, raven-haired figure. Cassandra had slipped past security, or perhaps they hadn't recognized her disguised under a hooded jacket and large sunglasses. "You have no right to be here," Ethan snapped, voice rising. Cassandra lifted her chin defiantly. "You can't keep me away from the child that should have been ours." Anger flared in Aurora. She approached slowly, her posture rigid, ignoring the postpartum ache in her body. "Get away from my daughter," she warned Cassandra. Each word measured her tone, lethal. Cassandra pulled down her sunglasses. For a moment, a flicker of vulnerability crossed her face, quickly replaced by defiance. "Ethan might have lied to me, but he also lied to you. You're not special, Aurora. The only reason he came home to you was because of this baby." Aurora took a sharp breath, steadying herself. "You think you know me. You think you know what my marriage is. You're just the other woman, Cassandra. You latched onto Ethan's money and made yourself a parasite in our life. But this ends now." A security guard dashed over, alerted by the rising tensions. Ethan motioned for him to remove Cassandra. She began to scream about how Ethan had promised her a future, that she had a rightful claim in his life. Her cries echoed in the hospital corridor, drawing the attention of doctors, nurses, and even shocked parents of other NICU babies. Aurora's parents held her back as security escorted Cassandra away. She had never felt such an intense mix of relief and revulsion. After the guard confirmed Cassandra was gone, Aurora slumped against the wall, tears burning her cheeks. Ethan whispered, "I'm sorry, Aurora. I tried to keep her away." She didn't respond, still reeling from Cassandra's brazen confrontation. With a shaky sigh, Aurora stepped into the NICU, determined to focus on her daughter rather than the chaos. As she cradled the baby in her arms, she wondered if Cassandra's final outburst had any truth. Did Ethan only stay because of responsibility for the child? The seed of doubt planted earlier now threatened to grow into a full-blown vine, choking her ability to trust. With the baby's condition improving steadily, the doctors finally gave Aurora and Ethan a hopeful date for discharge. After nearly 2 months in the NICU, their daughter, now officially named Olivia Grace Blackwood, seemed strong enough to go home. Aurora's relief was immense, a milestone she thought would never arrive. For Olivia's homecoming, Aurora decided to focus on the baby's well-being above all else. She insisted that Ethan place a restraining order against Cassandra, which the lawyers had already begun to process. In parallel, Ethan negotiated a settlement, hoping to silence Cassandra's threats. Aurora hated the idea that money would reward Cassandra's destructive behavior, but she saw no alternative that would bring peace. By the time Olivia was discharged, the paparazzi frenzy had died down a bit, thanks to the legal team's efforts to squash Cassandra's story. Still, Aurora couldn't ignore the emptiness that lingered between her and Ethan. He had betrayed her, turned their sacred union into a tabloid spectacle, and endangered the fragile beginnings of their daughter's life. Yet as Aurora cradled Olivia in the penthouse nursery, she felt a stir of maternal protectiveness. She wanted to give her daughter the best possible start, a family united, a sense of safety. But how could she maintain that, with her marriage in tatters late at night, while Olivia slept in her bassinet? Aurora and Ethan had a long, raw conversation. They talked about the reasons behind his affair, the sense of suffocation he felt as the demands of fatherhood approached, and the moral failings in his choices. Aurora confessed her own fears, how she had felt overshadowed in the opulent world he lived in, often losing her voice in the relationship. "I'm not excusing what I did," Ethan said, quietly, eyes downcast. "I made a terrible mistake. But I do love you, Aurora, and I love our daughter." Aurora's lips quivered. "Love alone isn't enough anymore, Ethan. You broke something. I'm not sure how to mend it." They decided to try couples therapy, an idea once foreign to Ethan's can-do self-made persona. But he recognized that his approach to life, throwing money at problems, burying emotional issues under business deals, had led him here. If he wanted to keep Aurora and Olivia in his life, he needed to change. Weeks turned into months. Aurora gradually regained physical strength, balancing the demands of motherhood with the emotional toll of therapy sessions and difficult conversations. Ethan immersed himself in every aspect of caring for Olivia. Night feedings, doctor visits, diaper changes. Part of him believed that through these domestic labors, he might atone for his betrayal. At times, Aurora glimpsed the caring man she had fallen in love with, the one who had listened to her passionate views on art and philanthropy that fateful night at the charity gala. But even these glimpses were laced with caution. Each phone call from an unknown number set her nerves on edge. Each text beep triggered a flicker of anxiety. Cassandra, for her part, had largely receded from public view after the settlement. She posted cryptic Instagram stories, hinting at future tell-all interviews, but no major media outlet spit. The hush money was substantial enough to keep her quiet for now. A turning point came when Aurora's father fell seriously ill. Aurora spent days by her father's bedside, and Ethan joined her, supporting her through the crisis. Daniel Reynolds stepped in to handle the bulk of Ethan's corporate responsibilities. This family health scare put everything into perspective for Aurora. Life was fragile and fleeting. She watched Ethan comfort her sobbing mother in the hospital corridor and realized that in spite of everything, Ethan was the man she had built a life with. It was then she decided that at least for Olivia's sake, she would give their marriage one genuine effort at reconciliation. She wasn't sure if it would succeed, but she felt it was a step she had to take, not out of obligation, but out of a deep-seated belief in second chances, shaped by her own experiences as a volunteer, a caretaker, a mother. Healing didn't come in sweeping gestures. It came in fractured moments, in silent apologies, in small acts of effort that slowly mended broken trust. Back in New York, after the media storm began to fade, and Cassandra was legally muzzled by the injunction Aurora and Ethan returned to the hard work of rebuilding. They resumed their couples therapy sessions with renewed intensity, no longer focused solely on infidelity, but now on the deeper cracks that had existed long before the affair. In one session, Aurora stared out the window for a long time before finally speaking. "I don't just want an apology for what you did," she said quietly. "I want to understand why. I need to know what was missing, or if it was always going to happen no matter what I did." Ethan's voice was low, raw. "It wasn't you. I mean that. It was never about you not being enough." He took a shaky breath. "Growing up the way I did, in foster homes, surrounded by people who never stayed, I've always had this fear that I didn't deserve what we had, that eventually I'd lose it. So I sabotaged it before it could be taken from me." Aurora turned to face him, eyes brimming. "And you nearly did lose it. You almost lost me. You almost lost Olivia." There was no shouting between them anymore. Just quiet honesty and an ache that couldn't be softened with simple words. Aurora's strength was returning slowly. Physically, she had healed enough to resume walks in Central Park with Olivia bundled in a stroller. Emotionally, she was learning to breathe through the bitterness. She no longer flinched when she heard Ethan's phone buzz. Still, the scars remained. Meanwhile, Olivia thrived. She was growing stronger every day, her cheeks fuller, her giggle quick and contagious. Aurora poured her energy into motherhood, finding comfort in the routine of Bottle's lullabies and Olivia's tiny hands curling around hers. It grounded her, reminded her what mattered. Ethan, too, was changing. He no longer disappeared behind business meetings or left at vague hours. He began leaving his phone in another room during dinner. He picked Olivia up from daycare, read bedtime stories, and sometimes just sat quietly with Aurora, not needing to fill the silence with excuses. One night, during a particularly emotional therapy session, Aurora asked him, "Do you think we can ever really start over?" Ethan looked at her for a long time. "I don't want to start over," he said. "I want to keep going. With all of it. The pain, the healing, the work. I want us to live through it, not erase it. Because it's ours. And I still believe in us." For the first time in weeks, Aurora allowed herself to believe it too. Not in what they once were, but in what they might still become. Just when the dust seemed to settle, when Aurora dared to believe their world might finally quiet, everything exploded again. It began with a message. A late-night ping from Ethan's publicist jolted him awake. He sat up in bed, glanced at the glowing screen, and felt his blood run cold. Check trending. Now. Within minutes, his name was plastered across social media like wildfire. A leak, anonymous but unmistakably sourced, had gone viral. It contained intimate details of his affair with Cassandra, photos, flirtatious texts, even voice recordings that left little to the imagination. The internet erupted. #Ethan Blackwood, affair, was suddenly the top trend on every major platform. Aurora, already lightly dozing in the nursery rocker, with Olivia nestled in her arms, was jarred awake by her vibrating phone. At first, she thought it was another NICU nurse checking in. But when she unlocked the screen and saw the headlines, the air seemed to vanish from her lungs. The betrayal she had tried so hard to put behind her had been dragged kicking and screaming into the spotlight. And this time the world was watching. Ethan paced the penthouse like a man caged. She broke the settlement, he muttered over and over, fury darkening his features. We'll sue. We'll drag her through the courts if we have to. But lawsuits couldn't erase what had already been seen. Aurora sat in silence, scrolling through the leaked content, her face pale. Each message she read felt like a new wound tearing open. Even the carefully crafted image they'd presented to the world began to crack. Friends reached out. Business partners called with concerned questions. The same people who once toasted at their wedding now looked at them with thinly veiled judgment. Later that night, as the penthouse quieted and Olivia finally drifted to sleep, Aurora stood in the living room, arms folded tightly around herself. Her voice trembled with exhaustion and fury. I can't keep living like this, Ethan, waiting for the next blow, the next humiliation. Ethan looked at her helplessly. I'm sorry. I never thought she'd go this far. But she did. Aurora snapped, and she will again, and now the whole world knows what you did, what you risked, what I tried to forgive. He approached slowly, as if nearing a wounded animal. I love you. I love Olivia. That hasn't changed. Aurora's eyes shimmered with fresh tears. Then act like it means something. She walked past him, gently picked up Olivia from the bassinet, and held their daughter out between them like a living reminder of what was still at stake. Look at her, Aurora whispered. This is who we fight for, not your reputation, not your ego. Her. Ethan's eyes welled up. He reached out to take his daughter, cradling her close. Then we fight. Together. Aurora nodded, her jaw tight. But no more half measures. No more promises without proof. That night, something changed. Not in the headlines, but in their hearts. The months that followed were not defined by a dramatic resolution, but by slow, painstaking steps toward healing, toward trust, and toward a future neither Aurora nor Ethan dared to imagine during the chaos. After the final wave of scandal, the world seemed to exhale. Cassandra Harrington, once so determined to thrust herself into the spotlight, had faded into the margins of social relevance. Her credibility collapsed under the weight of her own lies and her breach of the settlement agreement. The courts had ruled decisively, issuing an injunction barring her from speaking publicly about Ethan Aurora or Olivia again. She vanished from events and headlines, her name now synonymous with destruction, not glamour. Ethan and Aurora, however, were left with more than headlines. They were left with the ache of broken vows and the quiet challenge of rebuilding their home from emotional rubble. They didn't rush forgiveness. Instead, they embraced the difficulty of starting over. Together they gave a carefully managed interview, only once framing the narrative around Olivia's difficult birth and Aurora's strength. There were no salacious details, no mention of Cassandra by name. But for those who read between the lines, the message was clear. This family had been shaken, but it had not crumbled. Privately, the work continued. Aurora and Ethan attended therapy twice a week. In those rooms, there were tears, anger, and gradually vulnerability. Aurora laid bare the depth of her pain, her feelings of betrayal not only as a wife, but as a mother who had woken from surgery into a nightmare. Ethan, stripped of his usual confidence, confessed his deep-rooted insecurities. How fatherhood had frightened him more than he'd admitted, how he had chased control in all the wrong places. Slowly, the wounds began to close. Aurora's parents moved into an apartment nearby, eager to support their daughter without crowding her. Their presence became a grounding force, especially during moments when Aurora questioned whether trying again was worth it. Ethan stepped back from many of his corporate duties, entrusting Daniel Reynolds with day-to-day operations. It wasn't an easy decision. His identity had long been wrapped up in boardrooms and business deals. But he knew this time required something more precious than profit presence. The first true moment of peace came on the 1-year anniversary of Olivia's release from the NICU. Aurora and Ethan hosted a small gathering, just family close friends and the doctors who had helped save their daughter. Laughter, not tension, filled their home. Olivia toddled between guests, her joyful squeals echoing through the penthouse. As Aurora watched Ethan lift their daughter into the air, spinning her with a smile that lit up his entire face, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Hope. Not the kind born from promises, but from action, from effort, from choosing each other not once but over and over again. Life did not magically transform into a perfect fairy tale. Aurora and Ethan continued to have difficult conversations, but they also found deeper intimacy through honesty. The penthouse, once a stage for betrayal, became a sanctuary for their renewed love. Cassandra's presence faded into a cautionary memory, a specter of what could have destroyed them, but ultimately didn't. Aurora enrolled in online courses for early childhood education, partly inspired by Olivia's premature birth. She also revived her passion for philanthropy, joining Ethan in launching a foundation dedicated to supporting families with babies in NICU care. They named it the Olivia Grace Foundation. As for Ethan, he stepped back from certain high-pressure business roles. He continued to oversee major decisions for Blackwood Luxury Ventures, but delegated day-to-day operations. This shift allowed him to spend time with Aurora and Olivia, time to read bedtime stories, go on walks in Central Park, and rediscover the quiet joys that initially drew him to Aurora's gentle spirit. And so while scars remained, the Blackwoods forged ahead, determined that the darkest chapter of their lives would not define them. Their journey became one of atonement, resilience, and the belief that sometimes love, though cracked and tested, could still prevail. As Aurora and Ethan discovered, a single act of betrayal can threaten to tear everything apart. But it can also force a reckoning that leads to a deeper, more genuine connection. Their harrowing battle with scandal heartbreak and a life-or-death medical crisis proved just how fragile happiness can be. Yet in facing their darkest truths, they found a renewed sense of purpose to protect the family they almost lost and to create a legacy that speaks of resilience rather than ruin. If this emotional journey gripped your heart, please show your support. Like this video, share it with anyone who craves a real-life drama about love, betrayal, and redemption. And don't forget to subscribe for more riveting stories. Together, let's find strength in the struggles and hope in the heartbreak. Your support keeps these stories alive, reminding us that even when life shatters, we can gather the fragments and build anew.